All right, so it's Ratnavyuha here, and I've got Jnanadhara with me. Hello, Jnanadhara.
Hey, Ratnavyuha. Hey, how's it going?
It's good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, not too
Good.
bad. Yeah.
So, where are you at right now?
At the Dublin Buddhist Centre, actually. All here and just sitting in the office. I'm here because the internet is better here than it is at home.
Right,
So,
right.
and we've got a thing in Ireland where you're allowed to go out, but you can't go further than 2 kilometres from where you live. And happily, the centre is 1.4 kilometres from where I live, so
Right.
I can take my walk down to the Buddhist Centre and do stuff online.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And of course, you've just become president of the Auckland Buddhist Center and the Welllington Buddhist Center.
Yeah, back in February, I just made it back in time. Actually,
Yeah,
if I'd gone, a few weeks later, I might be stuck in New Zealand. Not that that would
yeah,
be awful, actually. In some ways, that'd be quite nice. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
happy I made it back to Dublin.
yeah. And we loved having you here. Everybody was really pleased with your visit and
Oh
looking
yeah,
forward
good.
to your next. But we're
Oh yeah,
lucky.
yeah,
We're lucky we get you now, don't we?
yeah, yeah. A bonus, a
Yeah.
COVID-19 bonus.
A COVID-19 bonus. Absolutely. So you're telling me earlier you guys have gone online and you've been doing some online Buddhist classes. How are those going?
Yeah, really good. Yep. We kind of yeah, I think the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, I think it was the 13th of March. That was when heavy restrictions came in, and we realised basically the following Saturday that we needed to close. So the centre's been closed for about 3 weeks, and
Wow.
we've been basically doing all of our. What we've been thinking is let's just replicate online what we do at the Buddhist Centre. So yeah, we're all getting used to what it means to run a Dharma class, to run a Buddhist Centre, and to have a sangha that doesn't meet in the flesh anymore, just speaks online. So the question is, how do you have a Buddhist center without a Buddhist center?
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking before this, we started recording, and we were both saying how the online offerings have worked better than we expected, and we might even continue them afterwards.
Yeah, well, what's been striking is just the number of people who are really enjoying the connection
Yeah.
because they live out of, they've been involved with the center before, but they've moved away. Like we've got people connecting, from different counties in Ireland, but also from different countries. There's an order member who lives in Malta, and
Wow.
he's able to connect into things that he wasn't able to connect in with before. So I'm sure it's going to change the way that the center operates.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it won't replace what we're currently doing, but we might decide to do some new things.
Yeah, yeah, great. And I was really interested in something you said earlier. You were talking about how with the class you cut you cut right to talking about true and false refuges. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting in a time of change, that topic.
Yeah, well, well, this is one of the things I've been sort of reflecting on is that, um, the Dharma says, the Buddha says that we rely on things that are impermanent, and we don't kind of realize that we're doing that. We don't realize how much we rely on that's actually not as stable as we think it is. So whilst things are usually relatively stable, they're never absolutely stable. And I think what's happened is, in the space of a few weeks, everybody's life has totally changed. The whole texture, the whole routine of it is completely changed. And it just really highlights the fact that, things are not as stable as they appear to be. And I think people feel that. They don't just feel that psychologically, they feel that existentially. I think there's a kind of there's a sense that there's definitely a possibility to be able to communicate, certain truths in the Dharma much more clearly and much more, as it were, forcibly than maybe one normally could, because people feel it. So if you say, things are unreliable, people think, yeah, right, yeah, so they are. Then the question becomes, well, what can you do about it? And then the Dharma's got quite a bit to say about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's very true. It's very true. Someone was we were talking to someone in an afternoon session we do, and she was saying that she
Mm.
works with companies,
Oh
and
yeah,
that particular company is going through an upheaval, and she was saying, but to be honest, it's pretty good because they were
yeah,
stuck. They
yeah,
they needed change, and this has
yeah.
created change, and I'm quite inspired by it.
Yeah. Well, what I think's happened, I mean, it certainly happened in a Buddhist center, in our Buddhist center in Dublin, is you have to think, well, what is a Buddhist center? Like, what are we trying to do here?
Yeah.
You've really got to ask some really fundamental questions. And I think what a lot of people, people have said this, it's a bit like when you don't do all the normal things that you do, you start questioning, well, why do I do all those things? What am I trying to get out of them? I think, if you're in any way reflective, some deeper kind of questions start emerging. I don't know, have you found that in your life, or how have you responded to this situation?
Well, I think that's a really good question you ask. It's just like, what is a Buddhist center? What is our Sangha? What are we
Yeah,
doing with all this sort of stuff? And
yeah,
I honestly don't think I've got an answer. I mean, my God,
yeah,
it's amazing to think that just 2 weeks ago, New Zealand went into lockdown,
yeah,
or house isolation,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's changed dramatically,
yeah.
how we relate to one another. But I'm not really sure that I've kind of got to the bottom of it, so to speak. What about
Yeah.
you?
Um, how am I finding it personally?
Well, yeah, I mean, you asked that
Uh,
question, like, what is the essence of a Buddhist center? What is the essence
oh,
of,
yeah.
it's like,
Well,
you
well,
got,
well, well, one thing, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but you just, part of what you're trying to do is to communicate the Buddha's teaching.
yeah,
I mean, it sounds so obvious, but the Buddha does say particular things about human life, and I think, in a way, what I've found interesting is it feels like the moment requires a slightly different presentation of the Dharma, because people are in a particular kind of space. So the question for me is not, what should I teach Buddhism or not, but what's the particular message and what's the starting point? So I think it's much easier to start from the. I don't know about this, but I wonder if it's easier just to start from the starting point that Buddhism starts for, which is just dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, discomfort, suffering, and that and the possibility of freedom from that.
mhm,
So um, that's kind of what I did an introduction to Buddhism course, an online introduction course, which we haven't done before, and that's kind of where I started from.
mhm,
Is that thing? It's something that Dante mentions in the survey of Buddhism. He says basically, it's not so much that there's a problem with things being impermanent. It's just the fact that we want them to not be impermanent. So when their permanence reveals itself, we experience dukkha. So then we've got two options. One option is to try and make existence accord with the way we want it to be, and the other option is to make our desires, accord with the way existence is. And he says the first is impossible. But the second is possible, and that's what Buddhism is about. So sort of starting from that point of view, and I think people, if you present things in that way, people think, yeah, actually that's kind of true,
yeah,
and then you can talk. Yeah, sorry.
no, keep going. Then you can
Well,
talk.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That
yeah,
quote, I think that's excellent. And I've heard that before, because the other thing I've heard him say too is that, the first one's impossible, and that,
yeah,
you can't really force existence to be as you want it to be. But then
yeah,
in one section or one
yeah,
seminar, he says, and who do you think's going to win that battle if it's between you and reality fighting for,
yeah, yeah,
and he's
yeah,
like, well, I'm
yeah,
afraid you're going to probably lose,
yeah.
and
But what I found interesting personally is my own kind of ignorance, my own unwillingness to kind of acknowledge the depth of the situation. So part of me sort of, I sort of think, it's not that bad, this COVID-19. I mean, it's not that terrible. I
mm,
think it's,
mm,
I don't know why everyone's reacting so. I mean, that's a bit of an overreaction, isn't it? And then you read the newspaper or you listen to the news and you think, oh yeah, no, this is actually pretty serious, extremely serious.
yeah,
Um, Global pandemic, unprecedented in anyone's lifetime, etc. And then I think, oh yeah, right, this is serious. But it's this part of me that doesn't want to acknowledge just the basic reality of the situation that I'm in. So I've kind of noticed this tendency in my own mind of it's just kind of like kind of ignorance, just pretending that everything's fine and nothing's really changed. So
yeah,
that's why it's difficult, isn't it? Because that's why being living in accordance with reality is tricky, because we've got this deep habit not really wanting to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I looked up the influenza pandemic of
Oh yeah,
1918.
yeah,
And,
right,
they estimate that between 10 million and 50 million people died,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
there were 3 waves of the virus. And, it's
mm,
very different then, because you're talking about lots of boats too. So, we've
yeah,
got this problem with boats now and the cruise ships and how the virus
yeah,
just spread there. But in those days,
yeah,
that was how people got to other
yeah,
places.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they didn't always have the ability to stop those boats or to warn them or whatnot.
yeah,
But either way, it was a huge. And when I looked at and researched and read up a little bit about pandemics and different
mm,
things that have infected the world's human population, I was surprised how much there is out there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, it's like it sort of challenges you, doesn't it? Because you know, it makes us realize that we're not going to be around forever.
Yeah,
And that, and that that's the thing about this COVID-19 is like, you think, wow, I'm in pretty good health and I'm not that old. But like it can affect people in completely unpredictable ways. So nobody can feel secure that they're immune to it, even if
yeah,
you're young and healthy. So it kind of reminds you that you're vulnerable,
yeah,
and
and
you always are.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like it challenges a sort of a pride in one's own invulnerability, which is actually mistaken, if you see what I mean.
That's true. And
Yeah.
left to itself could also be slightly depressing. Well, one of the
Yeah.
things that we've been talking about with some people
Oh yeah,
in
yeah,
our afternoon sessions we do online
yeah,
is also how Buddhism teaches you to develop qualities that death can't take away from you. And
yeah.
I
Right,
find
right.
that fascinating. Like a
Yeah,
things that no one can take away from you. I mean, you get
yeah,
into situations like Nelson Mandela when he's imprisoned, but
yeah,
well, what can they take away from him, and what can they not take away from him?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
from a Buddhist perspective, things like clarity of mind, gratitude,
mm,
generosity of spirit, kindness,
yeah,
equanimity,
yeah,
tranquility, even just curiosity
yeah,
and engagement with your experience. I mean, those are not things that and the Tibetans go so far as to believe that those things you can take them beyond death, because they're like,
yeah,
well, if and I think that's fascinating. So there's a bit of me just like loves cultivating things that no one can take from me in a way.
yeah. Right,
Um,
right,
you
right.
know,
Sure.
qualities that go beyond death.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the idea of a true refuge, isn't it? Something that is
Yeah,
actually stable, that isn't conditioned. So,
yeah,
conditioned things are inherently unstable and
yeah,
unreliable and impermanent. But if you
yeah,
can attain to a state that is, I mean, the way I've been trying to think of it in kind of dynamic terms is, that what I'm trying to develop is just an unimpeded, spontaneous responsiveness to whatever situation emerges.
yep,
Looking at like the freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion, and those kinds of terms
yeah.
as a and that yeah, you can't, if you see, if you know and see and feel and understand that everything's changing all the time, you can only be creative, presumably, in response to whatever happens, because you don't have an assumption that you can do it the same time you did it last time, because the situation's moved on.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
great. I love that idea of just being ongoingly creative.
yeah, yeah. And maybe it appeals to me because I come from a kind of musical background. Um, but there's this, I think it may be, and also because it's a dynamic kind of way of speaking rather than a kind of a negative way of moving away from things. It's like something that you're trying to cultivate.
It was very important to Bante too, Sagrachta, the founder of our movement. He
Sure,
loved the
sure.
imagination and the arts, and
Yeah,
he loved that whole vein of creativity, artistic creativity, and did affiliate it with the spiritual life. Yeah,
yeah. Well, I think yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, with him? I mean, you get the sense that he is, using that idea, saying that's what being skillful really means, is being deeply responsive to the,
mm,
what the situation really is and what it needs.
mm,
Um, and you know, and the encouraging thing is that anybody can be creative if you understand creativity in those terms. You don't have to be like, you know, really good at playing the saxophone, or, you know, really talented a writer. That anybody can be creative in that kind of, in that sense of creativity.
And in times like this too, if you're living life creatively, if you've got that dynamic going, then
Yeah,
these conditions allow you to, you recreate yourself. You
yeah,
become different because the conditions have changed. Your
yeah,
response to the conditions has changed, and that's
yeah,
something I've even found with this online stuff is
yeah, yeah,
people are different online. you
yeah,
know
yeah,
and interestingly enough, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I'm springing this on you. But
yeah, yeah,
I've noticed that some people who are rather shy in physical groups,
yeah,
when
right.
you get them online, they
Yeah, yeah,
actually they speak out more. And a good friend of
right.
mine, I was so impressed with something he said the other day, and I thought,
Mm.
wow, there's a level of comfort in what you're saying, a level of confidence that you don't
Yeah,
normally feel when you're in a group of
yeah,
like 8 of
yeah, yeah,
us.
sure.
So this medium does, it will draw other things out of people, and it'll let people be different
Yeah,
different
yeah.
you know
I've certainly experienced that. Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed that. Just the challenge of being taken out of my, because I've been doing classes and courses for
yeah,
years, literally, and now it's a bit like, oh, how do I do it this way? And I've really
yeah,
enjoyed it. I've actually been, you know, because I just can't do it the way I used to do it. It
yeah,
reminds me of actually, just speaking of creativity, I was thinking about Miles Davis the other day,
yeah,
and there's this famous story that Keith Jarrett tells about Miles Davis. So Miles Davis is this trumpet player, you know,
yeah,
very, very important jazz musician. And he's really famous for never repeating himself. And Keith Jarrett, who is another hugely famous jazz musician and pianist, played with Miles Davis in the late 60s and early 70s, that kind of period. And Miles said to him, he starts playing this is in the 70s, where he's kind of playing this sort of funk fusion kind of jazz. That funk fusion is not really what it is. It's, you know, but it's, you know, like electric piano, electric bass, drums, percussion, electric guitar, all this kind of thing. And he starts playing this ballad called Stella by Starlight. Miles Davis starts playing this ballad from,
yeah.
you know, like from 20 years, something he was playing in the 50s. And, you know, the bass player is like doesn't know the tune, because it's not, he's from a R&B funk kind of background. And then afterwards, apparently, Miles says to Keith, he says, um, do you know why I never play ballads? And Keith says, why is that? And he says, because I love playing ballads so much. So the inference is that
Oh,
he
yeah.
actually, he didn't want to keep doing the things that he was comfortable with, because he knew it would impede his kind of progress as a creative person.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah, got to the end. Whew, I thought for a moment there I might forget the punchline. Yes.
Well, congratulations, you passed.
Right.
The other thing you were telling me earlier, and I was a bit jealous. I was thinking, wow, that's cool. But you said that you've actually been doing morning study with Subhuti, who's in India at the moment.
Oh no, he's in Wales.
He's in Wales.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
he's
he's
in
in Wales. Yeah,
Wales.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Still though, what a wonderful opportunity. What's happened with that? How'd that happen?
Well, there's a friend of mine called Jotika who works with Subhuti. He's basically his secretary, and he just asked Subhuti, did he want to do some online study, you know?
Wow.
And he just invited a few order members in Ireland to join that group. So we've been looking at the Sutta Nipata, the chapter on the eights, which scholars say is one of the oldest Buddhist texts that we have. It's very ancient, so that the language is different from other Pali texts that you might encounter.
Mm,
And we've just been talking about really basic things about the nature of desiring, and how, you know, when you get what you want, it makes you feel good. So then you want more of it.
mm.
But if you don't get what you want, it makes you feel bad. You know, like just really basic. It's like what you've got in the Sutta Nipata is just like, sometimes it's talked about pre-Buddhist Buddhism. So before Buddhism got more developed doctrinally, it's just very, very basic kind of notions of fundamental Buddhist teachings. And we've just been talking about that, getting into all kinds of different areas, like, you know, Tibetan Book of the Dead and Yogacara, and going into all kinds of different areas, but just starting from these very, very basic kind of teachings, which are just addressed, again, just to the human existential situation. You know, what do we actually do, and how do we free ourselves?
Yeah, and I don't know if you found this, but after being involved with Buddhism for years, my discovery around Buddhism is it's actually, even though my knowledge is broadened with other kind of teachings from other cultures and other times, the basics of Buddhism have just got simpler and simpler and simpler. And I've realized that it's just really looking closely at what happens when I desire. Is that your experience too?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like the later different traditions bring out different aspects, but the fundamental principles are, just quite straightforward. It's just really difficult. In a way, sometimes I think the simplicity is a challenge. It's actually, we're kind of addicted to complexity, but actually, the Dharma is just really, the simplicity of it is, so sort of the radical nature of it is just, it's really so simple, and we get ourselves in all kinds of tangles. But that's what's wonderful about Subhuti, I think, is when I've studied with him, he's able to get, maybe to like, I studied this Yogacara text, which is quite highly developed and quite abstruse. If you just read the text, it was from Vasubandhu. It's his 30 verses, which is his famous text that he composed. And if you just read it from start to finish, it wouldn't make an awful lot of sense if you didn't know anything about Buddhism. Even if you do know a lot about Buddhism, it's quite difficult to understand. And we went through it verse by verse, and the wonderful thing with Subhuti was just able to get right to the heart of what it was talking about. I think that's one of his gifts as a teacher, is he can stay, he always knows what the fundamental is. I'm just going to turn my picture off and turn it on again, because it's just gone, did what it did earlier. Is it all right?
A little bit. It's better than it was a second ago. It's when you go back and forth, doesn't it? It's like the adjustment.
Is that what it is? Oh, right. I should keep still. And actually, sorry.
No,
I was just going to say, one of the other things with Subhuti is we've just been sort of talking about this sort of present situation, and just sort of musing on. Often it comes back to this present situation that we're in, and the significance of it, and what it means for people, and what it means in terms of the Dharma, and that's been very stimulating as well. Just being able to sort of bounce things off him.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I remember when I was in England in the late 90s, turn of the century, and Dante had done, Sagarachta had done seminars with some order members a lot. And I got there, and I think he did a seminar with under 35s, and I think I was 36 or, and I always regret having missed that. And I think these small study groups with senior order members like Subhuti are precious, and I'm glad you're getting that opportunity.
Yeah, no, it feels like one of the things I like is just being able to test what I think I know against somebody whose perspective I respect. It's like, this is the way I understand it. Is that right? Like, have I got that right? And Subhuti will tell you quite frankly if he thinks you've got it right, or if he thinks you've got it wrong, and explain why. In a really kind of kind way, but in a really direct way. So it's really electric, actually. Really stimulating. And like you say, it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity it wasn't so easy in the past. I mean, Subhuti living in Wales, it is Myers
Gwyn is the name of the place.
I mean, that's out in the middle of the country in Wales, and he can do a bit of study for an hour with you guys in Dublin. It's just like, in a way, we almost wouldn't have thought that's possible 2 months ago or a month ago. We would have said, oh no, that's no good. But now it's that can work.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm gonna wrap this up.
Great. Yeah,
We've also talked about possibly getting you in for a talk coming up. So we won't mention dates or anything like that, but
yeah,
that sounds like that might happen, which would be great.
yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that. It'd be great to. It's
Yeah.
quite. Yeah, I've gotten used to that. Actually, it's weird talking to a computer screen. I've done a few things where I'm just talking, well, even talking to a little dot on
Yeah.
a computer screen, just above the computer screen. And it, one of the things about this, actually, this whole situation is it's a real, it really challenges your imagination.
Yeah, it
You've got to
does.
actually, I've just been really trying to just think of the people that I'm talking to. I can see little pictures of them, but try and kind of get a sense of their being alive and real, and then trying to speak to that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
it does. Yeah, it
yeah,
does challenge the imagination. That's a good way of
yeah,
saying it.
yeah.
All right, Jnanadhara. Well,
Okay,
take
great to
care.
chat to you, Ratnavyuha, and
Yeah.
lots of love to everybody over there. I'll
All
be
right.
thinking of you. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, mate. See ya.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye. Bye.